2:14 a.m., 8 hours. That was the math. The only math that mattered. 8 hours, until I stood in front of a judge in a room that smelled of floor wax and old paper. 8 hours to prove I wasn't a screw-up. 8 hours to prove I was stable enough to be a father, not just a visitation schedule on a court-ordered calendar. I shifted in the driver's seat. The leather was cracked, a jagged line that snagged the fabric of my jacket every time I moved. Beneath me, the Honda vibrated. It was a nervous, mechanical hum that traveled straight up my spine and settled in the base of my skull. It felt like the countdown. Every rotation of the fan belt was a second slipping away. I tapped the dash. My earnings for the night sat at $42. 42. It wouldn't even cover the parking fee at the courthouse, let alone the lawyer's remaining retainer. I needed a miracle, or at least a surge zone. I swiped the screen, refreshing the grid. Nothing. The map was a sea of gray. I knew what was happening. I knew the code behind the screen. In my old life, before the divorce, before the bottle took the edge off the long nights, I worked logistics for a private security firm. I managed fleet tracking. I built grids like this. The app knew my acceptance rate. It knew my idle time. It knew I needed the money. So it was starving me, holding out for a low-ball fare that no one else would take. It was a digital squeeze. Cold, mathematical, efficient. I hated it, but I respected the architecture. Request, premium ride, pickup, 4400 block of Highland Park. Highland Park, the Fortress District. Heated driveways and security cameras that cost more than my entire car. It was miles out of my way, deep in the maze of winding streets that would eat up gas I couldn't afford to waste. But premium meant money. It meant a clean car, a professional driver, and a fare that could push me over the $50 mark. I tapped accept before I could talk myself out of it. The drive into Highland Park felt like crossing a border. The streetlights changed from the harsh sodium vapor orange of the city to a soft, expensive white LED. My Honda rattled like a bag of bolts on the smooth asphalt, the smell of stale French fries and old upholstery trapped inside with me. I passed driveways where six-figure electric cars sat charging in silence, their battery lights pulsing like heartbeats. In my old job, we used to call zones like this data black holes. People here didn't just buy security, they bought invisibility. They didn't know about legal hold notices. They didn't know about background checks that stalled for months because a vindictive bureaucrat stamped a file. They solved problems with checks, not sleepless nights. I pulled up to the curb at the pinned location. The house was dark, a silent monolith of brick and glass set far back from the street, except for a single security light above the side door. I put the car in park and checked the timer. 2 minutes. That was the rule. I waited. The silence here was unnatural. No sirens, no distant highway roar, just the low, electric hum of expensive security systems. I adjusted the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of my own eyes. Tired, red-rimmed. I pulled at the knot of my tie. It was polyester, $5 at a thrift store, and it felt like a noose. Then the side door opened. A figure slipped out. She moved with a hurried, jerky rhythm that set off alarm bells in my head, the movement of someone who expects to be stopped. She was wearing a trench coat that was too heavy for the mild night, belted tightly at the waist. Sunglasses covered her eyes. At 2:30 in the morning, she hurried down the driveway, her head ducked low. I unlocked the doors. She opened the back door and slid in. The smell hit me instantly. It wasn't just the night air, it was expensive perfume. Floral, heavy, layered over something sharp and metallic, like wet iron. "Just drive," she whispered. Her voice was tight, brittle as dry leaves. "Please, just go." I looked at her in the rear-view mirror. She had pushed the sunglasses up onto her head. The streetlight caught her face. Her lower lip was split. A bruise was blooming on her cheekbone, dark purple spreading under the foundation she had hastily applied to cover it. I knew that look. I'd seen it enough times growing up. It was the look of someone who had stayed too long and left too late. But it wasn't the bruise that made my stomach drop. It was the house she had come from. I looked back at the driveway. A patrol car was parked near the garage, half hidden by a luxury SUV. The number on the bumper was familiar. Unit 402. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that unit. I knew the man who drove it. Lieutenant Paul Miller, the man whose signature was at the bottom of the document currently freezing my custody application, the man who had placed the legal hold on my file, the bureaucrat with a badge who was strangling my life. This was his wife. My grip tightened on the wheel until the knuckles turned white. I was sitting in my car 8 hours before the most important hearing of my life, with the battered wife of the man who held my future in his fist. If I drove her away, I was an accessory. If I became part of her escape, he would burn me. He would make sure that legal hold never lifted. He would bury me under paperwork until I lost everything, until I lost my son. "Sir," her voice cracked, "please." I looked at the app. The destination was blank. I looked at the house. Dark, silent, a monster sleeping inside. I looked at the clock. 2:24 a.m. I could cancel. I could say I had a flat. I could protect myself. I could protect my son. I looked at her eyes in the mirror, terrified, pleading. I put the car in drive. The tires crunched on the asphalt as I pulled away from the curb, leaving the safety of neutrality behind. I wasn't just a driver anymore. I was involved. And God help me, I didn't know how I was going to explain this to the judge. "Turn right on Oak Street to access Highway 101, the GPS voice announced. It was bright, helpful, and completely oblivious. The blue line on the screen stretched out. It was the logical route, the fastest route, and I knew, with the bone-deep certainty of a man who used to design municipal surveillance grids, exactly what was waiting there. ALPRs. Automated license plate readers. They were mounted on the stanchions of every major highway entrance in the city. Little black boxes with infrared sensors that snapped a high-resolution photo every time a car passed. They logged plate numbers, timestamps, and GPS coordinates into a central database. If Miller woke up when he woke up and found his wife gone, he wouldn't clutter the airwaves with a dispatch call. He wouldn't risk a scandal. He'd just log into the system from his laptop, type in his own plate number, and let the grid do the work. I reached out and tapped the screen, killing the display. The blue line vanished, plunging the cabin into shadows. "I'm turning the app off," I said. My voice sounded rough, scraping against the silence. "We're off the record. If anyone asks, I never picked you up." The ride canceled. In the rearview mirror, I saw her shoulders drop an inch. She understood. She knew the man we were running from better than I did. "Thank you," she whispered. He tracks the accounts." "I know," I said. I steered away from the highway, sticking to the surface streets. We moved into the warehouse district, the transition marked by the change in streetlights. The expensive white LEDs of Highland Park gave way to flickering sodium vapor orange. Here, the buildings were dark skeletons of corrugated metal and chain-link fences. No cameras, just shadows. The silence inside the car was heavy, a physical weight pressing against the windows. It amplified everything. The creak of the leather, the rattle of the vents, and the heat. The AC compressor groaned, blowing tepid air that did nothing to cut the humidity. It was a wet, suffocating heat that clung to your skin like oil. Outside, the asphalt shimmered, radiating waves of stored energy back into the night air. Even at 2:30 a.m., the city felt like the inside of a kiln. Sweat trickled down my spine, soaking my shirt against the seat. But the smell was worse. It was a collision of worlds inside that small cabin. The vents were churning out the scent of my life. Stale fast food wrappers shoved under the seat, old coffee soaked into the floor mats, the sharp, nervous sweat of a man working a double shift. It was the smell of poverty and exhaustion, but overlaying it, thick and cloying, was her scent. Expensive floral perfume, heavy, sweet, something that probably cost more by the ounce than my weekly grocery budget. But beneath the flowers, there was something else, something sharp and metallic, copper, wet iron. It was the smell of fresh blood that filled the back of my throat, coating my tongue. "Do you have a phone?" I asked. The question cut through the thick air. "I left it," she said. She was staring out the window at the passing warehouses. "He put a tracker on it last month, said it was for my safety." "Smart," I said, "but trackers aren't just GPS dots anymore. In my old job, we used ping rates and cell tower triangulation to locate drivers within 3 feet. We analyzed latency to determine speed and direction even if the GPS signal was jammed. If you had brought it, He'd already know we were moving north at 35 miles an hour. She looked at me then, really looked at me, her eyes wide in the rearview mirror. Your old job, logistics, I said, security systems. Before everything. She didn't ask what everything was. She had her own everything to worry about. What's your name? I asked. She hesitated. Sarah, I'm David. I lied. The lie tasted like ash. Michael Reed had a court date in 7 hours. Michael Reed had a clean record and a son waiting for him. David was just a ghost driving a Honda through the industrial sprawl. David didn't exist, sorry, I muttered. Suspension's shot, she didn't answer. We were entering the intersection of 4th and Main. It was a wide, empty stretch of asphalt. Then, light flooded the cabin. Headlights washed over us, blindingly bright in the rearview mirror. I flinched, my eyes darting to the glass, my heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic, trapped bird. A cruiser. It was rolling slow in the left lane, hunting. It wasn't Miller's unit. It was a standard patrol car, looking for drunks or kids breaking curfew, but panic tasted like bile in my mouth. If they ran my plate, they'd see the pending court date. They'd see the legal hold flag. They might pull me over just to hassle me, to check my permit, to see why a gig driver was offline in a warehouse district at 2:30 a.m. And if they shone a flashlight in the back? If they saw the bruised wife of a lieutenant huddled in the seat? Get down, I said. It wasn't a suggestion. She slid low, disappearing below the window line. I kept my hands at 10 and 2. I locked my elbows. I breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth. Don't brake. Don't speed up. Just drive. The cruiser pulled up alongside me. I could feel the weight of the officer's gaze, a physical pressure against the side of my head. I stared straight ahead, projecting boredom, projecting the weary invisibility of the night shift. The moment stretched, an elastic band pulled to the snapping point. Then, the cruiser accelerated. It peeled away, turning right at the next intersection, hunting for easier prey. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My shirt was stuck to my back, cold, damp sweat chilling me against the seat. He's gone, I said. She sat up slowly. Where are we going? Not the police station, I said. You can't file a report tonight. Not with Miller's shift sergeant at the desk. I knew that roster. I had memorized the names of the men who protected him, and not the hospital. They have mandatory reporting protocols. He'll know before they finish triaging you. Then where? Her voice was rising, thinning with panic. The Pines, I said. Apartment complex on the south side. It's got underground parking, no cameras at the guest entrance. My cousin is the super there. He keeps a unit empty for between tenants. You can stay there for a few hours. Wash up, think it was a risk. A massive, stupid risk. Bringing her into my world, connecting her to my family. But dropping her on a street corner felt like a death sentence. And dropping her at a shelter felt like handing her back to him. Half the board members of the local shelter were cops' wives. The system was a web, and I was a fly trying to carry another fly through the gaps without touching the silk. Why? She asked. I looked in the mirror. She was studying the back of my head. You don't know me, she said. You know who my husband is. I saw you look at the house. You saw the squad car. You know the risk. I turned onto the frontage road. The tires sang on the grooved pavement, a high-pitched drone. The city lights blurred into streaks of amber and red. I have a hearing in 8 hours, I said, custody. My son, then you should have left me. Yeah, I said, I probably should have. I didn't explain. I didn't tell her that leaving her would have meant agreeing with the state's assessment of me, that I was a man who looked out for number one, a man without a moral center. I didn't tell her that saving her felt like the only way to prove, privately, to the universe, that I deserved to save my son. The legal hold was a piece of paper. This was real. The gas station was a concrete island in a sea of darkness. Wait here, I said. Lock the doors. I stepped out into the oppressive heat. I walked to the window. The clerk was asleep behind bulletproof glass. I tapped on the tray. 2 waters, I said, sliding a $20 bill into the tray, and a burner phone. Prepaid. He didn't ask why. He just slid the items through. Cash. Always cash. No paper trail. As I waited, I looked up. In the corner of the ceiling, a small black dome stared back at me. A security camera. Record, blink, record. Blink. I looked at the ATM. Another lens. I looked at the gas pumps. Cameras there too. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had spent 5 years designing systems like this. I knew the coverage maps. We weren't just being watched. We were being archived. The panopticon wasn't a theory. It was the architecture of my life. And Miller. Miller had the keys. I hurried back to the car. Here. I handed her the phone. Don't call anyone local. No one he knows. She dialed. I watched her face in the mirror. Then, the beep of a voicemail. Her face crumbled. She's not answering. Leave a message, I said. Tell her you're safe. Tell her to go to a public place. My phone lit up on the dash. A notification from the rideshare app. Ride canceled. I frowned. I didn't cancel it. I looked at the screen. The cancellation hadn't come from me. It came from guest user. My blood ran cold. The timestamp was now 3:16 a.m. It wasn't a glitch. It was a message. Someone had accessed the ride log remotely. Someone with admin privileges. Miller. He knew I had picked her up. He knew I was off the grid. And by canceling the ride, he was scrubbing the official record. He was erasing us. What is it? She asked. Nothing, I lied. But my hands were shaking. Drink some water. We're moving. We were ghosts in the machine now, hunting for a blind spot in a world that had forgotten how to blink. As the heavy iron gate rolled down behind us at the pines, the GPS signal on the dashboard died. Signal lost. It felt symbolic. I parked in a visitor spot tucked behind a concrete wall. We're here, I said. I led Sarah to Unit 304. Inside, the air was stale. Sarah walked into the middle of the living room and just stood there, wrapping her trench coat around herself. There's water in the tap, I said, towels in the closet. You should wash up. Where are you going? Panic flared in her eyes. I have to go, I said gently. I have to prep for court. I have to change my shirt. I'll come back for you. After the hearing, around noon, she repeated. Lock the door, I said. Don't open it for anyone. I walked back down to the garage. I sat in the Honda, gripping the wheel. I pulled my phone out. It reconnected to the network. A cascade of notifications tumbled down, and one from the parenting app. New photo uploaded. I frowned. Linda never uploaded photos at 4 a.m. I tapped the notification. The image resolved. It wasn't a photo of Leo. It was a screenshot. Grainy. Black and white. It was a feed from a municipal traffic camera. The timestamp read 2:38 a.m. The location, 4th and Main. The camera angle was high and steep. It looked down through the windshield of my Honda Civic. You could see me. My face illuminated by the dashboard lights. And in the back seat, you could see her. Sarah, sunglasses pushed up. The bruise clearly visible. There was no message attached. There didn't need to be. Miller, he wasn't just tracking Sarah. He was tracking me. He had run my plates. He had accessed the municipal feed. He had found my civil records. He found the custody case. He was reaching out a digital hand and placing it directly on my son's life. I see you, the photo said. I know who you are. I know where your family is. Checkmate. It was a perfect trap. If I went to court, he would release the photo and claim I kidnapped his wife. If I missed the hearing, I lost custody by default. I looked at the time. 4:15 a.m. I was trapped in a concrete box, buried underground. I slammed the car into reverse. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to move. I had to generate data. I had to be a moving target. Save the woman and destroy my family. Save my family and hand the woman back to the monster. There was no third option. Not yet. The shadow of the 24-hour laundromat was the only sanctuary I could find. The parking lot lights were dead, casting a rectangle of darkness against the back wall. I sat in the Honda, the engine off, the silence broken only by the faint sounds of commerce from inside the building and the frantic drumming of my own pulse. I leaned my head back against the cracked leather of the seat and looked through the passenger window. Through the plate glass of the laundromat, under the harsh buzz of fluorescent tubes, life was happening. Normal life. A woman in blue scrubs was sitting on a molded plastic chair, staring at her phone while a washing machine spun a kaleidoscope of colors behind her. She looked exhausted, probably just off a double shift at the hospital. Her biggest worry right now was whether she had enough quarters for the dryer or if she'd get enough sleep before her next shift. An old man in a faded windbreaker was folding sheets at one of the long tables. He moved with slow, deliberate care, smoothing out the wrinkles, folding corner to corner. It was a ritual, a small act of order in a chaotic world. I watched them with a hunger that surprised me. I wanted their problems. I wanted to worry about laundry detergent and dryer lint. I wanted to be inside that bright, warm box where the rules were simple. Put money in, get clean clothes out. Instead, I was out here in the dark, separated from them by a pane of glass that felt a mile thick. I was holding a burner phone that felt like a grenade, waiting to pull the pin. They lived in the world of daylight and laws. I had slipped through the cracks into the underworld, where cops were predators and fathers were fugitives. The isolation was absolute. I was a ghost haunting the edges of their reality. I looked down at the burner phone. It was time to stop hiding. Miller thought he was dealing with a driver, a nobody. He didn't check my file deep enough. He didn't know I used to manage the grid. Every system has a back door. I dialed the number. Not the police, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Hotline, a voice said. This is confidential, I said. I'm a witness. I need to log a time-stamped report of injuries involving a law enforcement officer. I am creating a shadow file. Sir, if you are in danger, call 911. I can't call 911, I said. The aggressor is 911. I just need you to log this. Timestamp 4:42 a.m. Victim has facial contusions, split lip, signs of struggle. She is currently safe. Case file reference pending. I am logging the call, sir. I hung up. The record was created. A digital footprint Miller couldn't scrub. Then, the hard part. I popped the back off the cheap phone. I snapped the SIM card in half and dropped the pieces into my cold coffee. I cracked the memory chip. Next, I opened the Notes app on my real phone. I took a screenshot of the threat photo Miller had sent. Then I typed a dead man switch email to my cousin. If I don't cancel this email in 24 hours, send it to the press. It was leverage. Miller wanted to erase us, but I was leaving breadcrumbs. I wasn't running. I wasn't skipping court. I was going to walk into the lion's den, and I was going to look him in the eye. The sky was turning the color of a bruised plum when I pulled back into the garage at the Pines. Dawn, the enemy of the fugitive, the friend of the honest man. Today, I had to be the honest man. I took the stairs up, my body aching with a fatigue that went deeper than muscle. My eyes felt gritty, lined with sand. I let myself into Unit 304 quietly. Sarah was awake. She was sitting on the beige sofa, exactly where I had left her, wrapped in a blanket from the closet, staring at the blank television screen. She looked up as I entered. The fear in her eyes had dulled into a flat, exhausted resignation. You came back, she said. I told you I would. I went to the kitchenette and washed up, scrubbing my face until the skin burned. I needed to wash off the night. I needed to wash off the fear. I dried my face with a paper towel. I opened my duffel bag, the go bag I kept for emergencies. I pulled out my suit. It was charcoal gray, polyester blend, bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. I had kept it wrapped in plastic. It was my armor. I laid it out on the bed in the spare room. Putting it on felt like a ritual, a transformation. The fabric was stiff and unnatural. It smelled faintly of dry cleaning chemicals and old plastic, a scent that stuck in the back of my throat. The shirt was starched too heavily, the collar tight and scratchy against my neck. It didn't fit right. It never had. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tied the tie. Over, under, through. The knot was simple and tight, like a noose. I looked at the man in the glass. He looked like a father. He looked like a citizen. He looked like a man who paid his taxes and followed the rules. But I knew the truth. Underneath the polyester, my skin was still crawling with the memory of the burner phone snapping in my hands. The man in the mirror was a fraud. He was a shadow operator who had just destroyed evidence and harbored a fugitive. Which one is the lie? I wondered. The driver who breaks the law to save a stranger? Or the father who wears a cheap suit to save his son? Maybe they were both lies. Or maybe they were both necessary. I smoothed the lapel of the jacket. It rustled. A dry, synthetic sound. I was ready, or as ready as I would ever be. When I came out, Sarah was standing. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. You look. She trailed off. Like a father, I said. Like a man who has his life together. You're risking everything, she whispered. The only way out is through. I handed her the burner phone, the one with the fresh SIM inserted. This has my cousin's number programmed in. Press 1. If I'm not back by noon, call him. He'll get you to a shelter in the next county, a real one. What about you? If I'm not back by noon, I said, checking my watch. It means I'm in a holding cell. Or worse. I didn't say worse. I didn't need to. We both knew what worse looked like. It looked like a traffic stop on a lonely road. It looked like resisting arrest. It looked like a closed casket. Thank you, David, she said, using the fake name I had given her. Good luck, Sarah, I said. I walked out of the apartment, leaving her in the safety of the beige walls. I walked to the bus stop, my dress shoes clicking on the pavement. The morning air was heavy, humid, already promising a scorcher. The bus stop was crowded with the early morning shift, nurses in scrubs with tired eyes, construction workers with battered lunch pails, students with headphones shutting out the world. The bus arrived, a lumbering beast of blue and white, groaning as it knelt to the curb. I stepped on. The air inside was thick and warm, smelling of diesel exhaust, wet umbrellas, even though it hadn't rained in weeks, and the stale, sweet scent of too many bodies in a small space. It was a stark contrast to the sealed, filtered silence of the luxury cars in Highland Park. This was the real city, the invisible city. I dropped my coins into the fare box. I moved to the back and grabbed a seat. The vinyl was sticky. I sat next to a woman reading a Bible and a man sleeping against the window. I felt a sudden, fierce kinship with them. We were the people the system ignored until it needed us to clean a floor or drive a car or fix a pipe. We were the gears. As the bus pulled away, lurching into traffic, I looked out the window. A cruiser turned the corner, rolling slow. Unit 402, Miller. My body reacted before my brain did. I shrank into the seat, my muscles locking up. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He was right there, 10 feet away. He scanned the street. He was looking for a silver Honda Civic. He was looking for a license plate. He was looking for a lone driver looking nervous. His gaze swept right over the bus. He didn't even see it. To him, the bus was just background noise. It was scenery. It was invisible. I let my breath out in a long, shaky exhale. He was hunting a car. He was tracking a digital signature in a database. He was hunting a ghost. I was already gone. The courthouse wasn't built for people. It was built for authority. I stood in the security line, clutching my plastic folder of documents. The air conditioning was blasting, a freezing gale that turned the sweat on my back into ice. It smelled of old varnish, floor wax, and anxiety. Belt off, shoes off, laptop out. The guard barked orders with the rhythm of a metronome. I moved through the metal detector. It didn't beep. I collected my shoes, my belt, my dignity. I scanned the atrium. It was crowded with lawyers in expensive wool suits that absorbed the sound, defendants in orange jumpsuits shuffling in chains, families crying in corners, a chaotic ecosystem of justice and misery. I checked the clock. 8:45 a.m. My lawyer, Miss Klein, was waiting by the elevators. She looked tired, her briefcase bulging with files that probably contained the ruins of a dozen other lives. She looked like the system itself, overworked and indifferent. You made it, she said, sounding surprised. I tried calling you. Your phone went straight to voicemail. Battery died, I lied. Any news? She sighed, guiding me toward a quiet corner. It's not good, Michael. The background check came back, flagged again. Administrative hold, pending investigation. And there's a new note, something about a person of interest in a disturbance last night. My stomach dropped. He had moved fast. He hadn't arrested me, but he had poisoned the well. What disturbance? I was home all night. It doesn't say, Klein said, flipping through a file. It's vague. Ongoing inquiry. But the judge is going to see it. Judge Halloway hates ambiguity. If she sees an active police flag on your file, she's going to grant the continuance. Or worse, she might suspend your visitation until it clears. It's a clerical error, I said, my voice rising. It's harassment. I haven't done anything. I believe you, Klein said, though her eyes said she was too exhausted to care about belief. But the file is the file. Unless we can prove it's an error today, right now, we're stuck. We walked into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and smelling of lemon polish and dust. My ex-wife, Linda, was already there, sitting with her new husband. She wouldn't look at me. She looked scared. Had she seen the photo? Had Miller sent it to her too? Then the door at the back opened. He walked in. Lieutenant Miller. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a suit, dark blue, cut to hide the bulk of a shoulder holster, but he wore it like armor. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on me for a fraction of a second before moving on. He sat in the back row, directly behind Linda. The sound was small, but it cut through the silence of the room like a gunshot. A silver Zippo lighter. He flicked the lid open with his thumb. Clink. He snapped it shut. Snap. He wasn't lighting it. He was just playing with it. In a federal building where smoking was banned 50 feet from the entrance, he leaned back, crossing his legs, looking bored, looking like a man waiting for a movie to start. Clink. Snap. It was a metronome of intimidation. A countdown. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Halloway swept in, black robes billowing. She sat, opened the file, my file, and frowned. Case number 44B, she read. Custody modification. Mr. Reed, I see here we have a flag from the PD. An active hold. Miss Klein stood up. Your Honor, we believe this is an error. Mr. Reed has no pending charges. No arrests. The system shows a hold, Counselor, Halloway said, tapping the paper. Placed by. She squinted at the signature, Lieutenant Miller, 4th Precinct. The sound came from the back row. Loud, deliberate. Silence in the courtroom. The air conditioning hummed, a low, menacing drone. I felt Miller's eyes boring into the back of my neck. He had signed his name to it. He was daring me to say it. Tell the judge. Tell her the man sitting in the back row is corrupt. Tell her you spent the night with his wife. If I spoke, I would sound like a lunatic, a desperate father making up conspiracies. And even if Halloway listened, Miller would release the photo. He would claim I kidnapped Sarah. He would destroy me. But if I stayed silent, the hold remained. I lost Mr. Reed. The judge looked at me. Do you have any explanation for this? I stood up. My legs felt like lead. I looked at Halloway. I looked at Linda, who was trembling. I looked back at Miller. He gave a microscopic shake of his head. Don't. His face was blank, cold, clinical. The face of a man who knew the system was built for him, not me. I looked at the file on the judge's bench. The paper that said I wasn't good enough, Your Honor, I said. My voice was shaky, breathless. I don't know why Lieutenant Miller placed that hold, but I know that he is in this courtroom right now. The judge's head snapped up. Excuse me, he's sitting in the back row, I said. He's not a party to this case. He's not a witness, but he's here. Heads turned. The stenographer stopped typing. Miller didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just sat there, perfectly still, the lighter resting in his palm. Is this true? Halloway looked over her glasses. Identify yourself, sir, Miller waited. 1 beat, 2 beats, 3. The silence stretched, becoming thin and brittle. He let the judge wait. He let the room feel his weight. It was a power move, pure and simple. He was showing us that he moved on his own time. Then, slowly, lazily, he stood. Lieutenant Paul Miller, Your Honor. Just observing. Public courtroom. Did you place this hold, Lieutenant? It's an administrative matter, Your Honor, pending an investigation into erratic behavior. Erratic behavior, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? I was walking the edge of a cliff. One more step and I fell. But I realized something. Miller was here because he needed to be. He needed to intimidate me personally because the paperwork wasn't enough. He was scared. Your Honor, I said, I am asking for the hold to be lifted, or for the lieutenant to state, on the record, under oath, exactly what crime I am suspected of. I called his bluff. In open court, the air in the room vanished. The judge had granted a 24-hour continuance. It was a victory, but it felt like a stay of execution. I walked out of the courtroom, my legs trembling under the cheap fabric of my suit. Miller was already gone. He hadn't waited to see the outcome. He didn't need to. He knew the clock was ticking louder than I did. I found a quiet corner in the law library on the 3rd floor. It smelled of dust, old glue, and dead cases. It was a tomb for things that had already been decided. for arguments that had been lost and buried in leather bindings. I sat at a small carrel, sheltered by stacks of legal encyclopedias that loomed like gravestones. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. Not the burner, that was silicon dust now. My real phone, the one Miller had tracked. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't call my cousin. I dialed the number for the state attorney general's office. The Special Task Force, State AG. Intake. A woman's voice answered. She sounded bored, robotic, reciting a script she'd said 1,000 times before lunch. Name and reason for call. My name is Michael Reed, I said, keeping my voice low, conscious of the librarians. I need to report a case of domestic violence and abuse of power involving a high-ranking law enforcement officer. I have a witness in protective custody. Officer's name, Lieutenant Paul Miller. 4th Precinct, sir, she said, not stopping her typing. If this involves a municipal officer, you need to file a complaint with Internal Affairs at the local precinct first. We don't handle initial intakes. You need to go through the proper channels. I can't do that, I said. The local precinct is compromised. Miller controls the roster. I can't report the devil to the devil. The typing didn't stop. Sir, I understand your frustration, but we have a process. Without a referral from a commanding officer or a judicial order, I can't open a file. I can give you the number for IA, bureaucracy. It was a wall, taller and thicker than any prison fence. She was going to hang up. She was going to log this as a crank call from a disgruntled citizen, and I would be dead in the water. Miller would find Sarah. He would find me. Playing by the rules was going to get us killed. I closed my eyes. The smell of the old books filled my nose. I thought back to my old life, to the nights spent recovering data from corrupted drives, sifting through legal archives for logistics firms. I remembered a file I had stumbled across years ago, a precedent that had stuck in my brain because it was so rare, a glitch in the system where the state had actually stepped in. Check the Sanderson case, I said. Excuse me, the Sanderson case. 2019. State versus Sanderson. My voice changed. The desperation bled out, replaced by something cold and authoritative. I wasn't asking anymore. It established the precedent for immediate state intervention when the local chain of command is demonstrably compromised by a ranking officer. It strips local immunity and mandates a special prosecutor. The silence stretched. The ambient hum of the library felt deafening. She wasn't typing anymore. She was listening. Sir, she said, her voice sharp, the boredom gone. Are you an attorney? No, I said. I worked logistics for the firm that handled the data recovery on that case. I know the precedent. I know that if I invoke Sanderson, you are legally required to escalate this call to a senior agent. If you don't, and something happens to my witness, you become liable. It was a gamble. I was reciting memory fragments from a life I had left behind, pulling a legal weapon out of the archives of my past. But the logic held. I had spoken the password. One moment, sir, Mr. Reed. A new voice. Deeper. Authoritative. This is Agent Ross. I'm listening. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 3 years. I slumped back in the hard wooden chair. I hadn't won yet, but I had turned the key in the lock. I have the logs, I said. I have the photos, and I have the victim, but I need an agent now. Where is the witness? Ross asked. Secure location, I said. I'm not giving you the address until I know you're the one coming. Smart, Ross said. I can be at your location in 40 minutes. Stay on the line, Mr. Reed. I looked at the spines of the law books surrounding me. They weren't just decorations anymore. They were weapons. And for the first time in a long time, I was holding the gun. Agent Ross walked into the apartment like she was entering a crime scene she had already solved. She wore a navy suit, cut sharp and tailored, and she smelled of expensive soap and absolute authority. The contrast was brutal. Hector's apartment smelled of stale coffee, anxiety, and 20 years of dust trapped in the carpet. There were empty water bottles on the table, a half-eaten protein bar wrapper. Ross looked like a surgeon stepping into a muddy trench. She didn't flinch. She just set her briefcase on the cleanest part of the table and opened it. Agent Ross, State Attorney General's office, she said. She didn't offer a hand. She offered a badge. 2 other agents came in behind her. Silent, efficient shadows. They went straight to Sarah. I stood in the corner. feeling the grime of the last 12 hours clinging to my skin. I felt ashamed of the mess, of my rumpled thrift store suit, of the desperation that hung in the air. But then I looked at Sarah. She was sitting up straighter. The fear was still there, but the panic was gone. Ross sat down opposite Sarah. She placed a small black device on the table. "State your name for the record," Ross said. Her voice was cool. "Clinical Sarah Miller. And you are here voluntarily, yes?" Ross turned to me. She didn't look at my suit. She looked at my eyes. "Mr. Reed, I've reviewed the logs you sent. The time-stamped hotline call. The photos. It's thorough. I used to work in logistics," I said. "Data integrity matters." "It does," she said. "It establishes a timeline that Lieutenant Miller can't easily disrupt. You have potentially saved this office months of subpoena work." She tapped the table. "However, you walked a very fine line, Mr. Reed. Technically, you transported a person of interest away from a potential crime scene without notifying local law enforcement. You harbored a fugitive. I protected a victim," I said. "The law sees what it sees," Ross said. "But given the circumstances and the target, we are inclined to view your actions as emergency intervention. For now, it was a warning. The danger wasn't gone. It had just changed shape. I was on their radar now. We're taking Mrs. Miller into protective custody," Ross said, standing up secure facility in Austin. "Miller won't be able to touch her there. We'll be serving him with a suspension notice within the hour." The agents helped Sarah stand. She looked at me. There were no long speeches, no tearful embraces, just a nod, a recognition between two people who had survived the same shipwreck. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping." "Good luck," I said. They walked out. The door closed. The silence was deafening. The apartment felt incredibly empty, stripped of the tension that had filled it for hours. I was alone, just me and the heat and the court date in less than 20 hours. I sat at the small kitchen table. I pushed aside the empty water bottles. I pulled out a legal pad Hector had left in a drawer. I needed to write a statement for Judge Halloway. My lawyer would file it in the morning. I needed to explain why I had defied a police officer, why I had hidden a woman, why I deserved to be a father. I picked up a pen. The ink was black, stark against the white paper. "To the Honorable Judge Halloway, my name is Michael Reed. I am a father. I am a driver. Yesterday, I broke the rules. I didn't write a legal brief. I wrote the truth. I wrote about the bruise. I wrote about the patrol car in the driveway. I wrote about the choice between following the law and doing what was right. I wrote about Leo. I want my son to know that his father is a man who stops," I wrote. The pen dug into the paper. "Even when it's dangerous. Even when it costs him. I want him to know that safety isn't about fences or cameras or legal holds. It's about showing up." It was a gamble. A massive one. Admission of guilt in a way. I was admitting to evading police detection. I was admitting to operating off the grid. But it was the truth. And after a night of lies and hiding, the truth felt like the only solid ground left. I signed my name. I took a picture of the statement and emailed it to Ms. Klein. "File this," I typed. "Submit it to the court." Then I walked out. I went down to the garage. I got into my Honda. I turned the key. The engine sputtered, then caught. The AC blew hot air, then slowly, grudgingly, cooled. I drove out into the afternoon sun. The light was blinding, washing out the colors of the world. I was exposed. I was vulnerable. Miller was still out there, and now he was wounded, cornered by the state investigation I had triggered. A wounded animal is the most dangerous kind, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I had placed my bet. I had put everything on the table, my record, my safety, my future, all for a woman I barely knew, and a son I loved more than breath. I drove toward home, ready for whatever came next. Judge Halloway's chambers were quiet, the kind of heavy silence that usually precedes a sentencing. Miss Klein sat next to me, her posture rigid as a wire. Across the oak table sat the state attorney, a man I'd never met, representing the system I had defied. "Mr. Reed," Halloway said. She wasn't looking at the file. She was looking at me. "I have reviewed your statement. I have also spoken with Agent Ross." I held my breath. This was it. The hammer drop. "Technically," she continued, her voice measured, "you interfered with a police matter. You transported a person of interest away from a scene, You failed to report a crime immediately. You took the law into your own hands. I protected a victim, I said. It was the only defense I had. Yes, Halloway said. It appears you did. She closed the file. Agent Ross informs me that Lieutenant Miller has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The evidence provided by Mrs. Miller is substantial administrative leave. It wasn't a conviction. It wasn't prison. But it was a crack in the shield. The monster was wounded. Regarding your custody case, Halloway said, turning to Miss Klein, the legal hold placed by Lieutenant Miller has been flagged as an abuse of authority. I am striking it from the record effective immediately. Relief hit me so hard I almost got dizzy. The hold was gone. The invisible hand choking my life had let go. I could breathe. However, Halloway held up a hand, stopping the celebration before it started. Your actions concern this court. Because of that, I am not granting full custody today. I am ordering a 6-month probationary period. A guardian ad litem will monitor your home. If there are no further incidents, we will review the petition. It wasn't a total win. It was a delay. Another hoop to jump through. Another stranger watching me, judging me. But it wasn't a loss. I hadn't lost Leo. I accept, I said. Good, Halloway said. Mr. Reed? Don't make me regret this. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun. The heat was still there, baking the pavement, but the air felt different, lighter. I inhaled deeply, tasting exhaust and freedom. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Safe. He can't find me. Thank you, Sarah. I didn't reply. I deleted the message. It was safer that way, for both of us. She was gone, into the protection of the state, but she was safe. I got into the Honda. The AC struggled to life, blowing tepid air that felt like a blessing. I drove toward the school. It was 2:45 p.m., pickup time. I parked in the line of cars, just another dad in a sea of parents and minivans. I watched the doors open. Kids streamed out, a chaotic river of backpacks and energy, and then I saw him. Leo. He was wearing his blue backpack with the space shuttle patch. He was scanning the cars, looking for me. When he saw the Honda, his face lit up, a smile that was pure, unburdened by legal holds or domestic violence or the messy choices of adults. He ran to the car. He threw his bag in and climbed into the booster seat. Hey, Dad, he said. Guess what? I got a star in math. That's amazing, buddy, I said. My voice was thick. I cleared my throat. I'm proud of you. Did you have a good day? He asked, buckling his belt. Yeah, I said. I looked at him in the rearview mirror. My son. My reason. I had a long day. But it was a good one. I put the car in gear. We pulled out into traffic, joining the flow of life. I was on probation. I was being watched. Miller was still out there. The fight wasn't over. But today, I was driving my son to get ice cream. And for today, that was enough. 6 months later, the envelope arrived on a Tuesday. It was plain white, cheap paper, with no return address. Just my name, hand-printed in blue ink. I opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a single photograph, no note, just a picture. It was a landscape, a desert sunset, vast and orange, with purple mountains in the distance. In the foreground, growing out of the dry, cracked earth, was a small cactus flower. It was bright pink, defiant against the dust. I turned it over. On the back, in the same handwriting, still driving, still stopping. I smiled. Sarah. She was out there. She was alive. She was healing. I pinned the photo to the corkboard by the fridge, right next to Leo's drawings and the court schedule. It fit there, a piece of the puzzle that made up our life. Next to it was the final order I'd received yesterday. Full custody granted. The probation was over. The guardian ad litem had signed off. Miller had been indicted last week. The news had been a small blip on the local channel. Officer suspended pending investigation. But it was an earthquake in my world. Dad Leo walked into the kitchen. He was taller now. 6 months had stretched him out, thinned the baby fat from his cheeks. He was holding his school tablet. Can you help me with this project? He asked. We have to write about a time someone was brave. I froze. Brave? I looked at the photo of the flower. I looked at the stack of legal paperwork on the counter. Brave, I repeated. Yeah, Leo said. Like, did you ever fight a dragon? Or save someone from a fire? Or chase a bad guy? I pulled out a chair. Sit down, Leo. He sat, his eyes wide and expectant. He wanted a hero story. He wanted action and capes and clear-cut victories. He wanted the movie version. I never fought a dragon, I said, but once I drove a car. That's boring, he said, wrinkling his nose. Maybe, I said, but let me tell you about the night I decided to stop. It was late, and I was tired, and I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that if I stopped, I might get in trouble. I might lose something important. Leo listened, his attention caught by the seriousness in my voice. But then I saw someone, I said, a lady, and she was hurt, and she needed help, and I knew that if I helped her, it would cost me. But I also knew that if I didn't help her, I wouldn't be the kind of dad I wanted to be. So what did you do? I stopped. I said, I unlocked the door, and I let her in. Leo frowned. But did you get in trouble a little bit? I said, but we fixed it, and the lady got safe, and I still gotta keep you. I reached out and brushed his hair back. Being brave isn't about not being scared, Leo. It's about being terrified, and doing the right thing anyway, even when it costs you, even when no one else is looking. Leo thought about this. He looked at the photo on the corkboard. Is that why you kept that picture? Yeah, I said, that's why. He tapped the screen of his tablet. Okay, I'll write that down. My dad drove a car. It sounded so simple, so small. Just a sentence in a second grader's homework project, but as I watched him type, hunting and pecking for the letters, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized was still there. The legal hold was gone. The fear was gone. I looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky the same orange as the photo. The world was big and dangerous and complicated, but in this kitchen, with the hum of the refrigerator and the tapping of my son's fingers, it felt safe. I had driven through the dark to get here. I had broken the rules to keep it whole. And looking at Leo, looking at the man he was becoming, I knew the answer to the question that had haunted me for months. Was it worth it? Every mile, every fear, every cost.